in this next conversation, we're going to talk about how school meals can be a climate solution. So I'm going to be welcoming Emily Weedon Chapman, the Global Lead for Social Protection and Labor Partnerships at the World Bank. Please give her a round of applause. Professor Appolinaire Djikeng, the Director General of the International Livestock Institute. And Aulo Gelli is a Senior Research Fellow for the International Food Policy Research Institute. Moderating the conversation, we have my favorite journalist of all time, Deena Shanker, a reporter with Bloomberg. Give her a round of applause as well. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you everybody here in the room and on the live stream. I was hoping we could start with a quick introduction of yourself from each of the panelists, just about, a sentence or two about what you do. And then I thought maybe we could begin with a little bit about the impacts you've seen from the recent cuts to humanitarian aid from the Trump administration.
Thank you, Deena. I'm Aulo. My job is really to assess the impact of interventions like school meals, so I'm delighted to be here.
My name is Appolinaire Djikeng. I'm the Director General of the International Livestock Institute. I'm a geneticist by training. I lead ILRI, which is a global organization present in 14 countries. The impact of the cuts is calling for us to collaborate more, to prioritize, and then to focus on what we can do with limited resources to move the needle.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Weedon. I work with the World Bank, and I'm thrilled to be heading up our attempt to reach 500 million more people by 2030 with social protection and labor coverage. And I think a big piece of the cuts that we're seeing, particularly as we're being more ambitious with our targets across the organization, is, again, that need to work with partners in a new way, but also look for proven solutions, things that we know help people in multiple ways and across all stages of life. And school meals is definitely one of those that ticks that box.
Great. And so talk to me a little bit about the impact of the cuts on school meals specifically, and within that, on climate goals that school meals try to hit.
So my job in some ways, so let me just connect it a little bit with the conversations we had earlier. And school meals is a very powerful connector. If you, on the words of the Lion King that we saw this morning, if you think of the circle of life and the connections between it, school feeding is a very powerful idea that can really connect the plate production and everything that comes with it. And it's so powerful that every government and every country that we know, most countries in the world, are actually implementing to the scale of about nearly 500 million kids every day getting a school meal, and about $70 billion spent on it every year. But most of that money comes from the government. Okay, so it's important to contextualize the cuts from the US to the investments the government make. And governments invest in these programs because they're proven to be effective. We know that giving school meals can bring children to school, make them learn better, and keep them in school to attain better grades. And once they do that, you improve their health and nutrition, and you have a whole set of other benefits, including longer and healthier lives. What we know, and maybe the critical part, is that it's a very good investment. So a study that tracked kids that had school meals in the 60s all the way through their life in Sweden found that for every dollar spent, you got $4 returns, mostly through their higher wages, but also through their health and nutrition. And the modeling work we did in other countries in lower middle income suggests similar rates of return. So it's a very good investment.
Great. It's so great to hear school meals discussed as opportunity rather than burden, which I feel like is usually how we hear people talk about them. It's like, oh, they cost so much money, and how are we going to do that? And now we have these new guidelines. But they really are an opportunity to do so many things, as you mentioned. Anything else that you guys wanted to add in terms of how the cuts are impacting the climate goals?
Well, we shouldn't lose the historical perspective. Where have we been? I think the school meals, we shouldn't leave that to the current wind and we forget about it. So I think the historical perspective of the school meal is there. It's not just things for the poor countries. It's really building communities. Why? the Greeks, the Romans, they had that. Going to school meant something. You go and get access to some food. And that's the story that continues. We could even personalize that. Myself, I'm a recipient of a school meal, not because we could not be fed, but simply because in our community, this is the western part of Cameroon, we needed to supplement our food with more nutrients. The local school is really where you build a community. Everybody comes there. 3 times per week, we had the porridge full of milk, you drink, and then they even teach you to brush your teeth. So I think we shouldn't forget that. So those are the things that we should always go back and look. But today, we can actually look at the school meal from outcomes. You know, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to build communities, healthy diets, people who are thriving in their community, and link that to the food system and make them more resilient and source from local producers. You can tick so many boxes. And I think this is where we reprioritize, we get the government to do this. It should not be left to aid and things like that. So it's my call that in all countries where we have seen benefits and continue to see the benefits of school meals, it should then be the priority of the governments to do that. You build communities. In the story, the Rockefeller, you had an event in Addis not too long ago. A young girl from northern Ethiopia came in. She championed why she pushed for school meals at her school. And the whole community rallied behind it. So this is a way to build communities and to do so many things. Thank you.
No, I would just pick up on that. And I think school meals occupy a unique space that is more fundamental to our community. Just as you said, there's a history there. And they're 99% funded by national budget. So it becomes distinct from the questions of the global aid crisis that we're facing. And I think what we're seeing is there is just an innate understanding of the importance of bringing children together and making meals. You know, in Washington, where my kids are in school, they learn life skills. Every year there's a different life skill that's taught alongside the regular curriculum. Usually it's athletic things like how to swim, how to bike. But sitting down and eating with peers and understanding the importance of that meal share and how to interact with people, I think is equally a life skill. And I think school meals brings that to the table. But sort of jumping back on the national commitment, what we then see from governments coming to the World Bank on the school meals question is very infrequently for financing. Occasionally, yes, they want to expand beyond their current reach and go toward universal coverage if they can't afford that within the national budget. But much more often, it's about reform of programs that exist. And how can they do more because they see the potential for the climate outcomes. And I really want to stress here for the job outcomes, for the connection to the local community, even in communities where women may not have the opportunity to work. The school is a safe space where women are welcome to work. Women are often working on the agriculture value chain anyway, and this gives them a captured market. And so we're able to see, there's a program in India that gave one-time capital grants to women, and a decade later, it had almost 500% returns on that single one-time investment. These are women who, it was not specific to school meals, let me clarify, but they were working in agriculture value chains, and even without a captured market, a decade later, they had almost 500% returns on their profits. And so if we could connect them to school meals, which we know should be sourced locally, give them the education of regenerative practices, we could really untap something. And that's what governments are coming asking. How can we do more with the money that we're already spending?
So I'm now hearing a couple of studies or looks at the impact of school meals where we're talking about seeing impacts like in measurements of decades or longer. My US-centric perspective tells me we don't have attention spans that long. We tend to want to see impacts, by the next election.
Right.
And so I am curious if you guys have any examples of really quick turnaround impacts, and sort of how we should think about implementing those and then really highlighting those impacts and showing how how beneficial these things can be.
Right. No, we have run trials, and we picked up effects over a 6-month period. We picked up effects over a 12-month period on kids' learning, kids' diets, and behaviors of their caregivers, including behaviors related to mental health. But the question, like Emily is saying, is really, how do we make sure that the programs are making the best return, right? So how can they deliver across education, nutrition, agriculture, employment? Because that's not a given, right? You know, how do we make these connections work? And we need a little bit of a better handle on how to manage potential trade-offs, right? Because what could work for a kid may not necessarily work for the farmer in some ways, right? So we need to understand how to best do it. And that requires maybe a little bit more time. But the benefits for kids, you can get them pretty quickly.
I believe that because I have kids and I see the difference between a hungry one and a well-fed one.
So let me highlight one example on the poultry. In Kenya, Ethiopia, the work that we've done there, but also in Uganda, the work by Iowa State University, having poultry facilities at school, having young boys and girls being interested in farming. 1 egg a day, they get the manure, they can have a little garden there growing some vegetable and things like that. School retention is there. People are excited, they understand agriculture. They can even explore career options at that age. And the Ugandan government actually is looking at trying to get that as part of the curriculum that you could graduate high school with. And with that 1 egg a day for those who are not going to have access to highly nutritious food at school, guarantee that they continue to be fed properly. And then you have home economics, which is also another dimension. They have to sell the eggs, they have to consume, they sell. You have a whole system at school. And I think these are some examples that you can score now, medium term and also long term. You continue to see the impact. You're building people who will be in communities, but also very strong global citizens, understanding what local development, community engagement means. And I think that's really, really important.
Yes, and I think bringing back home ec in the U.S., it would be like one of the biggest things we could do to improve diets and get kids to contribute more in the household. Not that I think about that kind of thing. So just last week, the New York Times Magazine ran a cover story with the headline, "Is the World Giving Up on Climate Change?" A lot of problems right now feel really urgent, and climate change has a way of often feeling remote. I mean, until the water's coming right under your door, and then you're like, climate change. But should climate play a central role in school meals when things like just delivering the school meals to the table, or making sure that those school meals, that people can fill out the paperwork to get their school meal? We have so many what feels like really urgent necessities on the school meal front. Climate can feel a little bit down the road. How should we think about climate when we think about school meals, and where on the priority list should we put it?
Well, I think, I've been going back again to earlier in the day and the statistics that have been rattled off already. I don't know about here in the US, but certainly in most of our client countries, climate change is here and it's a reality. The water is coming under the door every day, and people can't ignore that. And we see it particularly in some of the more arid countries, but I think also with typhoons, et cetera, et cetera. When we talk about delivering school meals, we do a lot of work, and this is going to get real nerdy real quick, on the system that allows for that delivery. Because once you create a strong digital system that has the capacity to reach those at the last mile of services, layering on top of that service the complementary support, the tailored support that people need to go alongside income support so that they can make the most out of that income support, isn't actually that much harder. So investing in the base system that allows us to reach people with a basic safety net, whether they need it most of the time, just occasionally during crisis, or in the case of school meals, whether it's an everyday delivery, once you have that system in place, how to tailor it, how to layer on top of it, because it becomes something that's really right at your fingertips. And so I think it's a false dichotomy to think about if we're trying to do too many things at once. Once you have a strong system, doing more becomes quite easy, and giving people the capital that they would need in order to strengthen their agricultural production and link into the school meal system, deliver messages, whether through text or through other digital means if possible, is something that really can unlock those opportunities and make climate an integral part of the delivery itself.
So I'm curious, here in the US, we've recently seen a number of actions from the government that don't bode well for school meals, even if that's not the direct target. So most recently, the USDA said they're not going to collect data on food insecurity anymore. We saw big cuts to SNAP, which will filter into school meals. We saw cuts to local food programs that were bringing local foods to schools. I was hoping, given your international experience that you guys all have, if you could provide any examples of times where the government was not supportive of bringing healthy, nutritious, environmentally sound school meals to the table, and local communities persevered and thought that could be a nice, optimistic.
Right. No, and building on, yeah, it's a great question. And building on what Appolinaire said, once the community, there's buy-in from the community, it's very difficult to turn the tap off. So school meals in Latin America, maybe the program that's most advanced alongside Brazil is Chile, right? Chile managed to develop the program throughout the Pinochet years. And Pinochet was not able to touch it because parents, communities were saying, don't you dare, right? And that's the power of having the community engaged, right? And having civil society can help advocate for the program, but it can also ensure that program funds are used properly, because things can go wrong with school meals and funding. It's a lot of money. And it's very important to have those checks and balances in the system that Emily was talking about.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Of course.
So is the community activism that you're speaking of, is this coming from opposing politicians that are bringing people together? Is it really grassroots? Is it parents coming together? Is it is it the farmers? Who is making this something so embedded into people's lives that it simply cannot be removed?
Absolutely. So remember the connector idea, right? So the connector idea is that underpins everything. It's you're investing in my children, our children, right?
Right.
So it's the parents. And then the parents, it's the farmers, it's the community. I remember a mayor saying to me, this preschool meal is actually helping my job as a mayor because it's bringing everybody together. It's a very powerful idea. And if you use that to sort of provide that check and balance with the data, and give them tools, give people tools to be able to respond quickly to issues. And information flow and giving a voice then becomes, catalytic. And we have plenty of examples of that. But just to add on what Emily was saying, I think with climate and agriculture, the intent has to be clear. Yeah, don't assume that all these things will happen just by chance. Be very specific about it, and then you can really program for it.
Great, that's good. That's a good lesson to have. Are there any? We're talking a lot about all the things that should be involved, and I'm curious, what parts of school meal program have you guys seen that maybe can be compromised a little bit, that turns out are not necessarily essential, and when there are so many competing priorities, are things that can maybe give way to things that are more important?
I don't have a specific example, but I just want to bring it back to the community. The moment you create incentives for parents, for schools, the whole educational system, to see that as part of sustaining the whole education, it's not going to fall apart. And you can also link that to local producers. You can create circular economies in schools, in homes, and things like that. So I think that's, for me, what will be left. There will be some shocks, to the whole thing, but the whole framework will remain. And I think this is essentially I would support school meals because I'm a beneficiary. And people who stayed in my community will continue to do it because it's something that they've benefited from it. And I'm very hopeful that, we can use that beyond to even create incentives on how you bring communities to tackle the issue of climate change. Going back to the New York Times question, we shouldn't give up. We have solutions. We are committed to do that. We have communities. If we create the right incentives, engage in the right conversation, people will contribute in mitigating and adapting to climate change. That's my message. It's just that often we are not in the same conversation and we expect people to understand what we are saying. But you can deliver climate benefits just through school meals in a school. Absolutely.
I would just pick up on that in terms of what could fall aside or how the program might specifically be designed to pick up on the community piece and involving mothers and fathers and farmers. They'll know best what can fall aside. They'll know best what the program should look like in their school for their children. And so when they're involved in the production of the food, they will be invested in having it be climate smart. They will be invested in making sure their fields are rehabilitated and that their children get a healthy meal. So I think if, again, we go to the grassroots of it, that will tell us. I think it naturally happens. I think the community knows what is needed, and bringing them into the conversation and not having it be a top-down decision process is better for the climate, but it's better for the program and the people.
I actually did comment in my school meal WhatsApp group that I noticed my children were coming home with chocolate syrup smeared on their faces and clothes, and I was wondering what that was about.
Mine is the day they get the French toast sticks.
That's
to
what they were
dip
dipping
into
that's
the
what,
syrup.
Yes.
Mhm,
They
come
thought
home
the
with
chocolate syrup was better
down
than the
that.
syrup, and I was like, I feel like they're both a little excessive, but maybe we could limit the amount of dippable sugar that we are handing out.
Please.
And then I said, and don't tell my kids, that was my suggestion.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank
you.
you, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.